This podcast is brought to you by Steede Motor Group, Claregalway. For your personalised vehicle shopping experience, find out more at steedemotorgroup.ie. So delighted now to be joined by Mayo football legend John Maughan and sports journalist Maurice Brosnan to look at the Connacht Club Semi-Finals this weekend. First up on Saturday at 2 o'clock, we have Corofin and Ballina. That game is going to be live on RT2, and that's at 2 o'clock on Saturday. And then we have the intermediate semi-final in Tuam at 1:30 between Monivea-Abbey and Kilmina. That looks like the last game in the Hayshed this weekend before it's going to be knocked and redeveloped there. And then as well, we have in the junior in McHale Park at 1:30 at the same time on Sunday. Lahardon McHale's will be taking on Menlough there as well. So a huge amount of action. It's quite simply Galway versus Mayo this weekend. But before we get into the games, lads, John, you've previously been involved with Lahardon. I think it was around 2017, but for a club this weekend, how special is it to be involved?
I suppose, Paul, to win your county title obviously is what every team more or less would have aspirations for at the start of the year. And I heard Kilmina talk about that in particular, who play in the intermediate championship this Sunday. But they've done remarkably well, obviously winning an intermediate title, having won the junior title last year and progressed to an All-Ireland final 2 years ago, actually. So for the likes of Lahardon, the excitement and the joy that I got, I mean, it's the club where my mother was born. My brother was chairman back at the time, and they inveigled me to travelling down. It's about 11 miles from where I live here on the Pontoon Road outside Castlebar. I went down for a couple of sessions, and obviously they couldn't get anybody, not obviously, but they couldn't get anyone to manage the junior team. And I ended up managing them, and we had a fairy tale run winning a county title, their first adult title they ever won in their history. And if you've ever been to Lahardon, a small, quaint little village where two pubs, and we contributed handsomely to the local economy that particular weekend when we won a county title initially. But the kind of excitement that you would associate with football maybe back years ago, well, for me, years ago, the excitement and the enthusiasm, and every single man, woman and child in the village came out to the county final and greeted us on the way home. And it was just a remarkable experience for me personally. I enjoyed it immensely. My family were immersed in it. I had a nephew playing. My brother was chairman of the club, and it was just a welter of excitement. And similarly for all clubs that are playing in the provincial championship this weekend, having parked away their county title to go on and on and try and build on it and win a provincial championship, it's a big prize. And maybe to go on a fairy tale run to an All-Ireland series for be it a senior, and I had the privilege of managing Crossminer to senior All-Ireland club back in 2003 or 2004, around that time, beaten by Nemo Rangers. But it's a wonderful journey. I played an All-Ireland club final with Castlebar Mitchells, my adopted county, in 1994. Well, albeit we were well beaten by Nemo Rangers on that occasion. But there's something special. It keeps the excitement and the enthusiasm as a player and as a supporter going right throughout the winter. So yeah, lots to play for this weekend.
Mars, it's where every club wants to be. From a Galway perspective, I think there's a lot of clubs kind of around the county looking at Corofin, and there's almost that kind of in your head, they're here again.
Both from the win in the county final, and then a week later, all the talk about this superstar Claregalway under-19 team, and Corofin and go and win that, and suddenly you're looking at both results, you're thinking, geez, this looks ominous, that they're starting to come through. And it's a credit to them, Paul. Like, you'd have to give the club massive praise for how they married the last great under-19 team with this current senior team, and the likes of Patrick Egan, who've just flourished this year, really come into their own. And then you have that old core, that's those stalwarts like Gary Sysons, the Farrers, and lads who are slowly filtering back in as well on top of that. So you're looking at it and you're thinking, geez, this suddenly is starting to look a bit ominous, and I'm sure there's a lot of teams looking at them. But at the same time, there is an element where football is a funny game. For 50 minutes, Corofin look absolutely in control in a semi-final, and then Milltown give them an almighty shock in the last 10 minutes, and they can nearly be turned over. That game, the county final, was neck and neck for 40 minutes. There was point for point, tit for tat, and then suddenly Corofin put on a manic squeeze and managed to finish. You look across the nation at the minute, and you see what happened to Kilcoo looking in total control against Scottstown. So I don't think any team should be getting necessarily, ultra cynical about this and think that there's another stretch of domination coming. As we've seen over the last couple of weeks, any team can be caught. But yeah, from a Corofin perspective, it was a fairly short follow-up period. Talking about hunger, and it's 3 years since they won the county title. I don't know what kind of hunger we have in Barnum when we've never won one, but overall, yeah, they look back to what they were.
Just on that, Morris, because you touched there in the 19s before you get into Corofin and Ballina and the matchups and the different bits and pieces. That Claregalway under-19 team has been fancied by many. I think they won an under-14 Fela, if I'm not wrong, there at A level. And like, this probably wasn't the most fancy Corofin team, but they still won the Northboard title. It does look fairly ominous when you look from that perspective.
Yeah, it's insane. Like, I because of the new rule trials at my day job, I would have covered a lot of the freshers football this year. And part of that was just to see how the new kick out and this rule about freezing sidelines going forward was working. But so I would have gone naturally to a lot of the University of Galway games, and you're looking through team sheets and seeing it just littered with Claregalway players, like absolutely all over. It's the same lads that we've seen coming up all the way along, and they do look. You'd be very optimistic about their prospects, and yet still. And I think Corofin were 5 points down at halftime. Were they in that game? Or 4 points down at halftime, and still managed to turn them over. Like, they just have it's a credit to the club. Whatever it is that they do in that club, Paul, they have an unbelievable ability to how they foster players. They're, from a coach education perspective, you look across the county, like look at Milltown, huge spike in the last couple of years, Corofin coach, Mike Cullen, Corofin coach. A lot of people would have talked about Dunmore McKay as maybe the story of the last 2 years, Corofin coach. Over in the West, you see a lot of them there too. Even from a coach education perspective, there was an award won, which is your first coaching badge session held in Killannon last week. Kevin Johnson gave the course. Gary Sice was given a kick passing course in Loch George. There were 70 coaches coming from all around the country coming to it. They just have a fountain of knowledge. They have resources internally, and I'm not talking about physical resources. I'm talking about from an intellectual perspective here. That would be the envy of any club in the country. How they managed to do that. So yeah, it's a credit to them. The only thing you can do is praise them, and I'm sure a small part of all of us outside will begrudge them a small bit too.
John, a Corofin man has made his way onto the Mayo senior football backroom team this year, Joe Kenny. And it's safe to say down in Mayo, it hasn't sat well with some people, a Galway man coming over the border. But from your own perspective, what's your own view on it?
Well, Paul, don't forget that we sent you John O'Mahony back in 1998. So it does happen. I've been around the block myself in a few places, but we were taken aback. First of all, I was surprised because I know Liam McHale personally, and obviously Kevin McStay. I know him personally, and their brother-in-laws, as you know. Liam is married to Sinead McStay, and I was quite surprised to see Liam step away for a fundamental difference as regards the coaching style or coaching structure. And obviously with Donny Buckley involved, Stephen Rochford, we all know about Stephen Rochford, having managed the team previously, Kevin McStay, having been involved with Roscommon and St. Bridget Roscommon, and loads of experience. And across the mind, a man there, Damien Mulligan, who coached Balmullah to a county final there 2 years ago. I was surprised to see them reach out for another coach, selector, whatever kind of a role he's going to fit into. I don't think it was necessary, to be quite honest with you. And there's a little bit of an unease about it, because many would feel that backroom teams are becoming enormous, and people are suggesting, well, you know, a manager's job now is managing the coaches and the selectors and the plethora of all those extra additions that are involved with psychologists and video analysis and one thing or another. And it's another body to and I'm not going to suggest it's another ego to manage, but all of these guys are competent, able, smart people, and they all have opinions. And you just wonder, when is enough enough? I mean, if you end up, and I would imagine that Stephen Rochford, who I respect, a fellow across the mind, I respect him greatly. He's a very, very good, talented coach. Donny Buckley is highly regarded. He's been all over the country coaching teams. Damien Mulligan would have his own opinion, and Kevin McStay would have his own opinion. Like, I mean, if you have that eclectic mix coming into the scenario, here's another one coming down from Galway with maybe another opinion. You just wonder, was it necessary? And I'm not in any way being disrespectful to Joe, and I wish him well coming into the Mayo scene, and hopefully it might be that little piece of the jigsaw that's missing. I'm not quite sure, and I remain unconvinced. We'll just have to wait and see what happens and how the whole thing evolves. But I didn't think personally, and that's, as I say, on Castle no expressions on the man coming from Corofin, but I thought we might have had enough.
Just with that, when you said there, inter-county management's becoming very big and large, and for a manager, you can have a lot of people to manage in the background. Do you ever see yourself going back into inter-county management, or is that book closed?
I get the impression it's closed for me. I'm sitting at a table here where I sat 5 years ago when I got a call from an ex-schoolmate. I went to school in the Midlands in Carmel College Moat back in the day with a very, very talented footballer from Galway, Val Daly, whose sons, John and Michael, obviously have togged out in the maroon and white. And a schoolmate of mine arrived in Castlebar, semi-unannounced. He was outside Castlebar when he rang me to see where I lived with Vinnie Claffey, and they were asked would I consider getting back involved in intercounty management. I had no inkling of doing so at that time, and that's 5 years ago. I wish I had, before I heard my mouth saying yes I would, that I had travelled up and down to Kilcormac a few times to get an understanding of the distance to travel 3 or 4 times a week. I found it tough, I'll be honest with you. I found it very hard. But I love football. I was at 4 games 2 weekends ago. I was in at Ballina, Stephen Ice playing Fulham Irish last weekend. I got so cold at that game, I didn't have the appetite to go in to see Kilmina win their game on Sunday. But I just love football. I love being involved in it. But at intercounty level, it's just gone to a level now where the real enjoyment out of it and the style of play, particularly what I'm witnessing now in recent times, it doesn't excite me. I'll be very honest with you. And there was times I looked over my shoulder and I felt like apologising to supporters that had paid 15 or 20 euro to come in and see a game. And I've watched some dreadful football matches here, including McHale Park. I watched a terrible game last year between Mayo and Louth that just, there was no entertainment. When you pay your money into a cinema or into the theatre, you like to be entertained. And I certainly don't see much entertainment in a lot of the football that I watch. Now, there are exceptions, of course, but more often than not, it's become dull and quite boring. So right now, that's a long answer to your question, Paul. Right now, no, I don't feel I'll ever get involved in intercounty management again.
Maurice, do you expect a good game here between Corofin and Ballina at the weekend, or is this something that's maybe going to follow I suppose, a similar pattern that we've seen throughout the year?
Oh, you've lined me up there now. No, I don't. I don't expect a good game. John might be better to answer this question, Paul, but I saw Corofin play at this stage. Actually, I've seen them play every game, watched every game they played in the championship this year, and I saw Ballina, the first game that was on TG Car, the semi-final and the final. So it's a small sample size, it's 3 games, but given the way that they seem to be playing, the thing that strikes me about Corofin is that they have principles, but they're not wedded to them. Like, they don't stick to that blindly. So they will tailor to what they're up against, which I don't think anybody would criticise them for. When the opportunity is there, like it was in the county final, they'll play brilliant football, progressive, taking on their men, front foot, shoot, load of kick past him. But on the flip side, the 2 games that actually reminded of me from the last 2 years, Paul, is the 2 Uachtarard games. The first last year, and especially against Uachtarard in the first day in Fair Stadium, when they saw how Uachtarard were going to set up, and they said, "Fine, we'll strangle you. If you're going to sit in there, we're going to work this. We're going to have a huge amount of phases. We're just going to take the ball off you." Their actual ball skills, their technical ability is so good that it's so hard to get the ball back off them until they shoot. So you sit in deep as Uachtarard did, and you'd anticipate Ballina this weekend, and it's just very hard to get the ball back. So it'll just be them in control of possession for prolonged periods. It's the thing that a lot of people detest. It can be very frustrating to watch. I think that would suit Corofin more than maybe would have suited a lot of the teams in Mayo, for example. I did definitely think there was a tactical issue in the Mayo final. Well, I thought there was a technical issue too. I thought there was some just bad options taken, really poor wides, goal chances going to begging, guy streaming in on goal with a man on his inside shoulder, and 9 times out of 10, if that's Corofin, it's a left-handed hand pass. It's straight across to the back post. It's palmed in at the back post. But you see players trying to spin their entire bodies, literally turning their chest outside to try and get a right-handed hand pass across, and it goes soars over their head and the move breaks down. So, but yeah, it's a long answer to the question, but I don't foresee it being a classic. I'm delighted to see it's on RT, and I think you have to give RT credit. They've done brilliant work with the club game. They're trying to do their best with. They're getting local pundits. I like the fact that they were in when they had the game in Healy Park last week. They got Peter Canavan and Ethan Rafferty. I thought that was a good idea. They were down in Kerry. They got James O'Donoghue and Kerry selector Michal Quirk. So they're doing their best to promote it and give it the full show and put it in centre stage. But I don't know if this game itself is going to deliver, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just to follow through on Maurice, and you alluded to it earlier on about that the mix of the more experienced players, and you mentioned a few. Gary Sice, obviously, the last day at a personal level was huge for him, winning another county championship after the trauma that he's had in his life and the difficulties. You know, they've got a lot of talent, they have a lot of experience, a lot of guile, and they're after bringing in a handful of young players who have just slotted into their system of play so effectively, and they do everything efficiently, and they're very, very good kickers of the ball. They have a different style of football, Corofin. Arguably the best football I've seen the last couple of years is Corofin at club level. They play a lovely kicking brand of football. They're just very, very smart. Their east-west runs in the inside line are very clever, very intelligent. They seem to synchronize so effectively with one another. And they're a talented bunch. And if you were to benchmark what we've witnessed in the two county finals, I'm not going to include what I witnessed last weekend because, no disrespect to Fulham Irish, they just were out of their depth. And, you know, Ballina played that game without Evan Regan, who had committed to going off on a stag. You had Pádraig O'Hora, who was in a boot at the game. He appears to have ankle problems. Dylan Thornton was another guy who would be a starter for them. So the three of their starting 15, and they still weren't pulling up. It was a no-show. I mean, Ballina's strength, unquestionably, is their defence. Like, I mean, with David Clark, they've arguably still one of the best keepers in the game. Ger Carfaghy is rolling back the years. He's been superb in every game throughout the championship. I would have Sam Callanan has just developed. He's like another Keegan. He has got so physically strong, and he is just he's like a marauding elephant playing at 6, and he is and Ballina played this a very, very effective defensive system, and of course the big, I suppose, threat with Brafey in the county final was Aidan O'Shea. And they nullified that threat from the get-go with playing Pádraig O'Hora as a sweeper, Sam Callanan doing a man-marking job. And I just think there might be a handful of players in that Corofin forward line. And, you know, but you've Liam Sice breaking from defence, you have Tony. They have so many options. I think an awful lot more options than what Ballina, and a lot more challenges. And they have a lot more firefighting to do facing Corofin than they would have had to date in the championship. To me, they were second favourites in Mayo. Everybody fancied Westport with the quality that they had on their bench. But of course, Westport got caught by Brafey. Must have taken their eye off the ball. I don't know what happened to that. We were all shocked with that performance. But yeah, we all know at this stage that the county final here in Mayo was a dull affair. It was terrible. But I'm not convinced about the quality and depth of the Ballina forwards. They're just not getting the return. Obviously, 3 points in the county final, 2 from Ballina from play from their full forward, Luke Feeney. I think one of them was a mark, actually. But Evan Regan is obviously their most talented forward and their most consistent forward. Not too sure they have enough firepower. So I think it could be ugly. I think Ballina will sit back and soak up the pressure early on. I think certainly Corofin, having home advantage in Pearse Stadium, having played the county final there, yeah, to me, I think this might be a step too far for Ballina.
With that, Mars, what John mentions there, Liam 6 runs. If you sit back in Corofin, you're going to give them the platform. Gavin Burke, Liam 6, Dylan McHugh, and Kieran Malloy, and it's just they're so dangerous to stop when they get the overlaps going.
Yeah, if they catch it like that, you're dead. Like the one that I thought actually my favorite score from the county final. Not that I'm sitting here ranking every score from the county final, but the one that's off my head is, remember when Peter Cook was carrying down the centre channel, Patrick Egan, like exceptional footwork, lined him up, hand in, strip tackle, and immediately you just saw it. It was like they were totally in sync. Here's our chance. We're going to go hard here. So Egan gets the ball to at the Dillon wall. What's his first thing he does? Head up, beautiful kick pass into Mike Farher, who's coming off the shoulder, Liam Siddick, like from one corner to the other, just a sweeper move. He sweeps off the shoulder, kicks his second point, and that for me was that distilled Corofin. It was heads up, it was front foot football. When the chance was there, every single option was perfect. Every single skill was brilliantly executed, from the tackle to the kick pass to the support run to winning the ball out in front. They did it all seamlessly. So if you give them opportunities like that, you're dead. They'll carve you open. And just on the other point, John, can I ask, like, from there's a natural thing, I suppose, when you look across the border, you see the way certain counties are running their championships versus the natural thing is to do the comparison. And I am kind of curious when you mentioned the list of walking wounded from a Ballina perspective. Like I think there's a lot of talk about the split season, and I'm kind of curious when you compare Galway and Mayo now, for example. And I was talking to Aidan O'Shea for my own job yesterday, and he mentioned that Dublin, who are All Ireland champions, started their championship before Mayo did, which I found kind of baffling. And then when you look at it, I think Ballina would have only played 6 games. I think I'm right in saying, between their group, the quarterfinal, semi-final, and final, which, Paul, is the average amount of games that a club would get in Galway. I mean, you've clubs who are upwards of 8 or 9 games actually from a championship perspective. And on top of that, then, because they started so late, you go from you have a 2-week gap rather than, let's say, for a 3-week gap, which I think a lot of teams would like, a chance to celebrate their county title. Then you have a week of solid training and then a week of prep. So they go from 2 weeks into the Fulham Irish game into this Corofin game. Like I would imagine I don't know how clubs would accept that, or I imagine there's a bit of dissatisfaction with the championship. But just natural thing is to compare what one is doing versus the other.
I think we might just see.
Look at Morris. The bottom line, for me personally, the split season is not working. Yeah, sorry, Paul.
Oh, we have you there. Your screen just seems to be frozen at the minute.
Is mine frozen?
Yeah. No, I have you now.
Sorry, no. Just look at this. The split season for me. I was just having this conversation tonight earlier on this evening with one or two lads. We've lost about 6 weeks in perfectly good conditions, summer conditions, where there's no activity whatsoever here in Mayo. Yeah. And I think during the summer season, particularly when the weather is good, run our championships, get our championships up and running earlier. Like, and here we are now, we're looking at the weather forecast, and that's what my coaches and managers are doing. The style of football now has changed fundamentally, because we could have a hailstorm, we could have something similar to what happened in Galway this week in Pearse Stadium. We know like what Pearse Stadium was like. It was any bit of a puff away the thaws, the gale force in Pearse Stadium, and that had a huge bearing on the type of a game that's played as well. But look, at the bottom line is, to me, the split season hasn't worked. Here we are running up into Christmas. It's been an incredibly long season because our club championship was a bit slow. The kick started kicking off here. We lost a lot of weeks, even though a lot of those intercounty footballers would have been back preparing with the club. So I look at what's required. That's all I see on that, Morris.
That's interesting with the split season, because even there last week we had Conor Whelan on, and he was similar to Darragh O'Donovan with the comments on the split season. John says it hasn't worked there, and a lot of people have said it hasn't worked. Are you along the same lines, Morris, or where are you at the minute?
Like, I'm not sitting here head in my clouds and pretending it's perfect. And I think it's the first time maybe in the last couple of weeks that there has been, I think, an interesting element of criticism of it, like properly vetting it. You referenced Darragh O'Donovan's interview with Michael Varney in the Irish Independent. Liam Sheedy wrote a really interesting article in our paper about the consequences for Tipperary hurling. But the thing I keep coming back to as well, Paul, is that there is all the split season did, to my mind, is give a window, a clearly defined window. That's what it gave. And within that, there is scope for county boards to do more totally independent because I do think sometimes maybe we would look to HQ to solve everything, to be the overarching solution to what everything's on. And there definitely is an element. Like, I compare it from a Galway perspective to a Mayo perspective. It's just what happens because of, I try and be as objective as possible. And this is not about having a go at Mayo whatsoever. There's a lot of things I give them praise for compared to Galway. For example, on the county final ticket prices, I think Galway got that badly wrong. I do think they deserve criticism for that. I think it was way too expensive for a county final. But on the flip side, I think the way they ran their championship structures was excellent, and the fact that they guaranteed the games are starting in the middle of summer. If your lads were going off the States, fine, and they would deal with the consequences of that internally within their own clubs of missing championship games. They just said, we're going to put on a program of games here for our club players. So that meant if you were a senior player, you were getting a minimum. I mean, I think only Uhtred, as far as I can think of, only played 5 championship games, but a lot of clubs would have played 6, 7 or 8. So they would have got plenty of championship games, and that filtered down to a brilliant program of games for intermediate clubs, for junior clubs, to the extent where I mix between a junior and a junior D or junior C team this year. I mix between 2 junior teams this year. And on the bottom junior team, whatever grade that was, they got 6 championship games. 6. So these are, a lot of those lads are lads who, there would be guys like Carl Mannion, who, you know, had a storied career for Roscommon, relocated to Galway, joined their club, is just looking for an element of football that he can keep playing. And he gets a good program of games from his own perspective. 6 championship games, the same as provided for 17 or 18-year-olds who are trying to get up to the grade. So I think Galway got that perfectly right. And when I compare it to what counties like Mayo did, I think they got it wrong. Like I don't understand why they didn't put on a bigger program of games. I don't understand why. Like John's point there about, I can imagine if I was a club player and you're sitting there in the beautiful weather of the summer, looking out the window, and you're looking at a block of training, you know, a month's block of training, because you know your championship is starting today, you'd be furious. I think that's totally right. So I just think I fully accept that it is not perfect, and I think maybe some people are too quick to depict it as being it. But even within it, I do think there is scope for county boards or for internal to drive that change that I don't see enough of. I don't see enough of that sort of creativity.
But Maurice, Galway clubs next year.
Point. Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, I was just saying.
Sorry, Paul. I was just going to make the point there. Just following on. So we got a bit of delay there. I just make my observation on it. What Maurice has said there is absolutely right, and we're both agreeing. The bigger elephant in the room we're here right now is the entertainment value. That's not there. I mean, as a spectacle, and we could talk about this for hours, but unfortunately we haven't got the time to do so. But I mean, the reality is, I have been up and down the country since every week for the last number of weeks, but particularly since our own county final here, in my hometown of Castlebar, that said they're finished. They're not going to another game of football again. They just had it up here. I met one guy last Friday night in the Travis Centre Hotel, and he said, "John, I was unlucky enough to pick 2 games. He was at the Mayo Loud game, and he happened to be at the county final." He said it was the most boring I have ever seen, and it was preceded by the junior final, and just wonderful entertainment in the junior final. And I witnessed something that I've never seen before in McHale Park. At halftime, the senior game, which is a showpiece of your club activity, and it should be your big county final. I mean, there was literally hundreds walking down the iconic McHale Road, walking out of the game, because they were just completely fed up with what they were viewing. And I don't want to be this, and it's what happened. And it needs a seismic and fundamental rule change. And I mentioned this to Larry McCarthy, and I said I was doing co-commentary on the game from Mayo TV. And I said, I'm glad Larry McCarthy is here. Unfortunately, he won't be around long enough to implement change. And I met him by chance in Cork Park on Tuesday. I was up at a meeting there, and I just met him by chance. I said, Larry, it's not a committee we need now. On Saturday evening, McHale Park, by chance with Johnny Tobin, who's heading up a committee on reviewing rule change. We need seismic changes in our rules in order to bring back the fun. Remember, this is the choice of hobbies for players. And I know that the cohort of players that are playing senior football, junior and intermediate, particularly at senior club level, where they're overcoached and they're playing a system where they're not allowed to give the ball away. It's ball retention at all costs, turnovers, everything is being evaluated on that basis, and it's all wrong. So that's my little event on that aspect of it. But we certainly need change in that, and it's not working, and the volume of games. But to me, the bigger issue is rule change, and we've got to do something and address it now. Otherwise, we will not have people come to our games.
John, I have to ask you there, since you mentioned world rule change. What's the one rule change you want brought into the game?
Well, something that's going to be policed easily. I mean, obviously this pass back to the goalkeeper for throughout the game. I mean, I know for kickouts. I think that some of the rule changes that have been introduced in the third level. Morris has had the benefit of seeing those at third level competition. I haven't. You must kick it out past the 45-yard line. This mark is a joke as well. I'd eliminate the mark because more often that was introduced, obviously, to try and get guys kicking the ball. Now it does. It has improved guys trying to win a mark by kicking the ball, but it does. It hasn't resulted in high feeling like we hope. But I would eliminate passing back to the goalkeeper at all costs. I would try, and if it can be policed towards 4 attackers inside the 45-yard line at all times with some sort of a punitive measure. Now, that could be a midfielder, it could be half back line that will step back in to the behind the 45 line in order to create a bit more in McCare part of the Mayo Loud game. Our keeper on that occasion had 6 options to kick the ball out, maybe 8. All 6 backs were available to him and the 2 midfielders because the opposition had retreated in their entirety behind the 45-yard line. Now, when I get the ball as a fullback or a centre half back and I look up, and of course, you know, somebody in the crowd saying, "Will you, for feck's sake, Maughan, kick it in?" And you look up and you see 20 bodies in front of you. There's no point in kicking it in because you've got 15 of the opposition back there. So you got to introduce a rule that's able to suck them out and bring them maybe four players or 5 or whatever it's going to be inside the 45. Eliminate the pass back to the goalkeeper. Yeah, the kick out outside the 40, past the 45-meter line. There's 2 or 3 that might help, but do it now. Let's not wait for Congress, and let's not wait for an age to introduce these changes.
We just seem to have lost Mars there. Hopefully he'll be back in a minute or two. But
Fine.
John, just do you think these need to be some of these rules need to be put in straight away for the 2024 season?
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, bureaucracy is great, and we all understand that. But unfortunately, it's too slow. And for us to introduce rule changes in a period of review and trial, and this idea of trying them out at third level competition to see how they work. I mean, I think we've got to grasp the nettle here and just take a chance, get them in for our national leagues in 2024. Because I'm telling you, the reality is there's so many people that are just absolutely cheesed off watching Gaelic football because it's not fun. And I know it's not fun for a lot of players either. And we have a great game, and we all love it. We're talking about it here. We enjoy it. We've had wonderful days out, and then again, 1 in 4 or 5 games, you see this marvelous spectacle with a Hollywood finish, and you say, "Geez, sure, look at what's wrong with the game. Everything is brilliant," but there is something wrong, and more often than not, games are poor. They're ugly, low scoring, not enough goals. Yeah, not enough attacking play. So yes, whatever kind of it changes, let's sit down. Whatever the committee have come up, let's run with it. Be bold. Let's have a go. And at the end of the league period, if we said, "Oh, hey, that 4 of those are good, we'll continue with them," and three of the changes we implemented or not, you know, let's be brave and have a go at doing something. But I think our game needs it now.
Mars, we just lost you there, but John's along the lines here that we need new rule changes in for the 2024 season. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think John nailed it on the back pass to the goalkeeper. I think that's I think part of the problem, Paul, in Gaelic football at the minute is that people are struggling to articulate what exactly is the issue. Like, what's the problem in Gaelic football right now as we talk? Is it the hand pass, or is it control, the blanket defence, or what exactly is the issue? And when I keep coming back to it, I think the bedrock of the issue right now is control. That there's too much control in Gaelic football. It's too easy for me to get the ball and hold on to the ball for prolonged bouts of spell. So because it's so easy to get the ball and hold on to it, teams get back into the blanket defence because they can't win it back. We don't police steps, so we don't have a robust enough tackle. So it's very, very hard to press a team and win the ball back. And as a consequence, a lot of teams have decided they're better off dropping it back and playing their percentages. And coaches, inherently, a lot of coaches are risk adverse, so that's why they do what they do. And so you need to tackle that. That's what you need to get at. You need to tilt the risk reward balance to make it harder to control possession. So you police how you transfer possession, you police the steps rule, you give a more robust tackle, or B, you make it easier to win the ball back. And John's point about not letting teams go back to their goalkeeper, if you, for example, an idea I proposed elsewhere before is if you had a bang on the back pass to the goalkeeper in their own half, an immediate consequence of that is that it's a lot easier to press up because you can't go back to your goalkeeper. If I press you in your full back line, you can't go back to your goalkeeper. You either have to go past me or go long, get the and that's what we want to see. That's what we want to see, the chaos, the contest, the collisions, a higher balance of risk reward, teams taking chances, seeing if they come off or they don't. So that's what you need to tackle. And every single rule trial, to me, you need to keep that at the forefront of your mind. So I went to the 2 freshers games. And some of those games were good games. Like the NUIG against ATU was a great game, but it is, because of the rule trials they're trialing right now, it is beyond random. Like and this was always going to happen because coaches immediately look at ways to circumvent it because they want to maintain control. The first thing that has happened this year is that the opposition forwards all retreat outside the 45 on the kick out. They do not stay in their positions. They all come back out. So the middle area there is like a war zone. So that is, and as a consequence of that, they're now behind the ball and they could retreat behind the ball continuously as possession goes on. So it's the bank of control that we're trying to avoid. So I think that's what you need to get at, and how we do that. A band of goalkeepers is, if you had a 2-point arc, for example, if you put in a 2-point arc, it's not necessarily to reward long range shooting. I do like to see long range shooting. I think we've seen some great exponents of that. But a consequence, if you had that arc, for example, is that the opposition are immediately forced to press out, because if you leave a guy in open space and he has a chance to hit a 2-point, he's 100% more scoring return. The risk is so much higher. You can't leave a guy there, so you're forced to press out, which it means we get rid of these teams sitting in that tight banks behind the ball that they would press up. But and all of this, I do think there's an acknowledgement, and John has mentioned John Tobin's committee, who've published some brilliant data, and I do think that he's the right people involved in his committee. That's finally making progress, because these rules came from the Rules Advisory Committee, and I would suggest they've tried. There is acknowledgement of the problem. I'm not necessarily sure if these are the ways to go about fixing it. I think maybe a lot of these rules are being circumvented. They don't think of the law of unintended consequences. So it would be a fear for me, but it's not going to. I don't think we'll see it for Congress of 2024, because these committees naturally just take a lot longer. But I do think, given the fact that what John Tobin's had up, the amount of data they produce to show the fabric of Gaelic football right now, we are headed in the direction where we're going to see, if not immediate rule changes, definitely more rule trials.
Yeah, I think you're both spot on there with these rules that need to be implemented. I know we did go a bit off topic there from Corofin and Ballina, but just to kind of finish on Corofin Ballina, is Pádraig O'Hara the man, John, who's going to pick up Gary Sice this weekend?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure Pádraig is a good man marker anymore. I think he's a very effective player. We've heard that term, warrior. He is a warrior, and I have great respect for him. He is literally carried Ballina on his back through some games, and the tougher the better. He loves the battle, and he's as strong as an ox, and I have great admiration for him. I just think the man marking role probably doesn't suit him. I think they have a number of players there. Sam Callanan certainly is a guy that can. I don't know. I think they probably want to hold him in the centre of a defensive role. Gerard Carfagate, as I say, is another able. Defensively, Ballina are strong. It's up front, I feel, where they will struggle, and that's where they struggle, obviously, particularly against Brafey. I mean, it was easy for them last weekend, but they have a problem in their forward line. They just don't have the same kind of a cohesion as a Corofin. They're not as good. The fundamentals, and Maurice alluded to those. Their striking is not as crisp, is not as good, and obviously the basic fundamentals. They just don't have that skill set that, to me, is really good enough. But at the same time, they're all, as I say, they play with a certain cohesion defensively. They're really hard to break down, and if they set up defensively, it could be an ugly arm wrestle. But I just think, looking at the qualities that Corofin have, particularly in that county final, and obviously a lot of people thought Mike Cullen, particularly with Johnny Maloney after joining them, that might give them just that other little bit of impetus. But obviously Sean Kelly was a huge loss in the county final. But I mean, even though Corofin only, I think they were up by 6 points at one stage, they only eventually won by 2. But they play with that kind of a reckless abandon. They don't sit back and protect the lead. They have that kind of a game philosophy. Irrespective of how they're doing, they're just going for it. They just drive on. They have that kind of killer instinct all the time. They won't sit back and protect a 1 point, 2 point, 5 point, 6 point lead. They will go for it. I think Joe Bradley alluded to that in an article during the week where he actually focused in on that point. He said that's the Corofin. And just for me, the man marking roles that you asked me about, Paul, it's difficult. I'm only guessing as to what they might do, but I think they will pack it. They'll pack their defence. Liam Silk is so effective. Like, I mean, marking the real danger man, Keneally for Mike Cullen. Not alone did he hold him scored with some play, but he went up and kicked 2 points to himself. I think he popped the pass to Tony Gill to Pam into the back of the net.
Yeah,
he's a very, very effective. He is a top class. Incidentally, are there a few of the Corofin boys returning from their All Ireland final appearance trip this week? Have they all gone off to Thailand or off gallivanting? That might be a telling factor come Sunday.
Maurice, how do you see some of the matchups unfolding?
I don't think this idea that you could put a runner on Gary Sice and try and stress him the other way, I don't think is going to work, because they're so good at pawning over. And if, for example, if Sam Callanan goes to Gary Sice or Pádraig O'Hora and tries to drag him out the field and run, he's not going to follow him. There's enough players around him who will do that job. They're in sync. They're able to pawn over. So I don't like. Owen Kelly is probably one of the best athletes in Galway, but even anytime he tried to go forward, wasn't necessarily Sice's job to. The Corofin know what his skill set is. They know where he's most effective, and they let him stay close to goal. So I wouldn't foresee that happen. I think John made a good point there in terms of Ger Cafferty tends to stay close to goal anyway. He'd probably be a good enough matchup for Gary Sice, kind of two warriors going at it. So I'd probably see that. I think Sam Callanan would be better suited. Corofin has so many link pairs, so it's hard to identify one. But in particular, when you see how Kieran Malloy and Dylan McHugh are able to link them together, the way they could pop up as half back or half forward. You saw the point that Kieran Malloy kicked in the county final. Dylan McHugh was an assists machine. I think at a matchup like that might be better suited to a guy like him. John made a really good comparison earlier with Lee Keegan. He does kind of remind me a bit of him, both in his ability to absolutely dog into somebody if he needs to, and I think he'd be very effective as a man marker, but also match them side to side and try and force them on the back foot and maybe ask a couple of questions going the other way. So I think that would be probably be more suited. And then the flip side is that if ever Regan plays, he knows he's going to have to deal with Liam Silk, who is just he's just a nightmare, because he's so defensively sound, but then he just times his runs the other way to perfection. He's so good at getting up the other end of the pitch. I'll be interested to see. Ballinach tried to press, at least for the first half, anyway, they tried to press kickouts against Brafey. Maybe necessarily weren't getting as much hands on it, but doing that to Bernie Power is another thing entirely, and he's so good at getting the ball off. And now we've seen that he actually has really good fetchers around the middle. And I think a matchup that I would have got wrong for the county final was, I did think Cullen had an advantage in that regard. He had just that monstrous middle third, but it didn't trouble Corofin at all. So it'd be really interesting to see, do they persist with that? Do they try and press him? And if they do, how react to that? But yeah, but if they do, see a lot more. Only start to dominate a bit further, and the
Maurice, you're breaking down there. Your coverage has gone a little bit hazy.
Yeah, we just seem to have lost him there. Frank Irwin is someone who's been in and around the Mayo panel, John.
Yeah.
You'd expect him probably to go toe-to-toe probably with Patrick Egan this weekend.
I have to say, Frank Irwin has been one of the better performers for Ballinach throughout this campaign. Himself and his brother, Big Jack. Jack not as effective as Frank. Frank has been playing exceptionally well for them around middle of the field. He's done kicking frees for them. I expect that to be an interesting duel. He's capable. Frank is very capable of holding his own. Good striker off the ground as well for 45s, free kicks. And watch him last weekend. He's in a good vein of form at the moment. And I have no doubts about him. I'd just be interested to see how, like Evan Regan, after a weekend in Germany, I think it was Germany that went off for a weekend. I hope he's managed to flush the system from a Ballina perspective. Pádraig O'Hora going around wearing that boot last weekend, not for the first time this season. So I'm not quite sure how bad he is. Dylan Thornton is another good footballer for Ballina, and he nicked his hamstring in the county final. Didn't feature last weekend against Fulham Irish. Now that said, last weekend was a nice workout for them in McHale Park. It was dry conditions. And they didn't embellish their reputation in any way and they were never really, really pressed. So if anything, it was an ideal workout for them. The fact that they're playing 6 days before they play Corofin certainly wouldn't have taken anything out of them, because they were able to work their bench. So I wouldn't be over concerned about that. But look, as I say, I think Ballina will certainly hold their own defensively. I think around middle of the field, they won't have any great issue there. It's just, as I say, have they got enough firepower up front? Conor McStay, busy at 11, very, very busy. The score returns aren't huge. From Luke Feeney at full forward, a young footballer I think will play inter-county football for Mayo. He's a big unit. I think he's only 18 if he's 19 years of age, but he's a big handful at full forward, orthodox style, strong, and gets half a chance, can score. But just after that, you just become a little bit worried about them. And that's my observation, as I say, based on what I've seen so far. But as someone said to me today, look at Ballina, Corofin, I think was it 1998, they dethroned them as All-Ireland club champions. I was going back to that time when Lee McHale and David Brady were playing midfield, and I think they won on that occasion. But look at the history is there. Mayo clubs have a great record in provincial championships.
Is it even more important though for Mayo club like Ballina to give a performance this weekend, considering what happened in Mycullen and Westport last year?
Well, that was a horror show last year. I was saying that it was quite embarrassing. I think I'm going to make an excuse for Westport. I assume, having won their first senior title in their history, that they partied hard, because it certainly was a no-show against Mycullen here in McHale Park. It was a little bit embarrassing for them. But it is important. There's a big question mark over Mayo football right now. A lot of people say, look, we're on the slide. I think the standard of inter-county football has dropped, with exception of maybe one or two teams. 10 years ago, you had 6 or 7 teams that you think had a chance of landing Sam Maguire. Right now, I think that's down to maybe 1, 2, 3, Derry, Kerry, Dublin. Mayo just had the appearance of begin to drop a little bit. Galway, question marks over them as well. So I think that balances itself out, Paul. It's a big game at home for Corofin, at home in Pearse Stadium. They certainly won't want to be beaten by Ballina. So look at it's all in the day, as we say. But for me, if I was punting on this one, I probably would shade it in Corofin's. But don't be surprised if Ballina make it very, very ugly for them.
Maurice, I presume you're along similar lines here. The Corofin are going to beat Ballina on Saturday.
Yeah, Corofin for me, Paul.
And why?
I just think they're a better team. I think they're better set up. I've been more impressed by what I've seen them this year. They're motoring nicely. I think from a young perspective, the fact that they've won one now, any sort of psychological baggage that might have been there for that young core. I think there was young players in that team, Paul, who never played Milltown before at any level, because they would have been opposite in the day, and Milltown underage wouldn't. So this has been a huge year of discovery for them as a club. They've got some brilliant people in there around them, kind of shepherding them through. I went to a coaching education thing last week for that Gary Sice and John Davely were running out in Lough George, and it was on last Saturday, and there was coaches from all over the country there. But they were doing a kick passing session. It was coaching the kick pass, when to kick and how, and just to watch how good Gary Sice was, which they were the under 15 Galway development squad, and how there's young lads there who I'd kind of know from covering school games or maybe from my own secondary school, and who started out very unconfident, especially on their weaker foot, and how Gary gently coached them along, showed them body angles, showed them the positioning, kicking with the instep, all that kind of thing. By the end of the thing, they were pinging ball all over the session, and that was in one session. Now you multiply that by a year, and can you imagine the benefit of a guy like that for this crop of under-19s that are coming through? So I just think they're in a very good place. It's hard to see them being beat this weekend.
Just before we finish on that, Maurice, I'll bring John in after. Can you see Corofin winning any American this year?
Yeah, but I think I wonder, is it partly because I think there's certain teams playing football that doesn't actually suit their skill set, Paul. I watch it particularly in club football. I think going back to or not to dwell up this conversation about the state of play again, but there definitely is an element that teams who I saw put up great scorelines last year and who had really good forward lines aren't playing to suit them, and maybe it's a consequence of that. But for whatever reason, there's a lot of teams this year who you'd watch and think they would be a lot stronger than they are, and games are a lot closer. And you see a lot of shocks, especially in club football over the last couple of weeks. So on that basis, I wouldn't have any degree of confidence about tipping anybody. Kilmacud are understandably the favourites, but I wouldn't have a degree of confidence about tipping any team. I think you could see more shocks coming. So I don't necessarily see one this weekend, but they're absolutely capable. They have the skill set there. They've got their bench is only getting stronger as it goes, and they will probably get stronger again when, you know, I imagine Daithí Burke post the Claregalway game is now back in there and is coming into the wreck, and they've got a fairly talented under-19 team who are filtering through, a great coaching ticket, so they have every component necessary to go on and do it. Yeah,
John, I take it you wouldn't be surprised if you've seen them either later on in the year.
I think as Maurice has said there, I think they have the game to certainly compete for Andy Murrigan. There's no question about it. Like, I mean, you'll see an incremental improvement. It's amazing what can happen after you win your county title. That kind of, you park that. Now you can go and really throw the kitchen sink at it and have a right cut and see where it takes them. And I think that the bit of pressure is off them from landing a county title. Go on and win a provincial title, which I think they're capable of. I really do think they're favourites to win a provincial title. Sure, after that, it's anyone's game. Look what happened last weekend. Scottstown beat Kilcoo. A bit of an arm wrestle for 50 minutes, 10 minutes of excitement towards the end. Certainly Corofin are more than capable of living with those boys on the basis of what I've seen. Kilmacud, as you say, as Maurice mentioned there, he appeared to have a very, very strong squad, a lot of talent up front, obviously, that we all know about. But when it comes to it, I mean, I wouldn't bet. I never bet against Corofin. They're just, anytime they've got into the mix in the shake-up, they just produce outrageous performances. Like, I mean, the best football I've seen ever from a club side has been from Corofin. They just play a style that's so easy on the eye, attractive foot passing. Yeah, they're a good team for sure.
So that's Corofin and Ballina Saturday live on RT 2:00. Both lads there have went for Corofin to win that, but it'll expect it to be a tight enough battle between Corofin and Ballina. Moving on to the intermediate semi-final on Sunday, the final game in the Hayshed, it looks like, before it's going to be redeveloped, between Kilmina and Monivea-Abbey. This is kind of a difficult enough one to call, Mars.
it is, yeah, big time, and they're probably two clubs who have very great stories, and for whatever reason, the idea of maybe the state of play competition, I don't know about you lads, but the more you watch lower levels, the more you watch schools games or intermediate or junior games, it doesn't seem to be as affected by the conservatism that we're seeing at senior level. I've absolutely no explanation for why that is the case, but definitely from my impression from watching games this year, that has tallied. From a Monivea perspective, like, the big thing for me, Paul, was the way they spoke about Kenny McDade after the way they spoke before the game. Where I know I would have spoke to Francis in the week before the game, and he would have referenced it right, that it would be a huge team for them, that they were kind of devastated to see him suffer the injury, and it was a huge kind of driving factor that they'd get him up the steps. He was their captain. He pushed himself pretty hard to get back fit for this year, and then the stuff right in the semi-final was a fairly cruel blow. And then to hear him interviewed after the game and reference the fact that he wants to be back in the new year, and if they can make it to Croke Park, he'll be there. So I think that's brilliant. And then on the flip side, from a community perspective, like, I don't know, did it go underrated? But how impressive I think it is to beat a Kerry club in a junior or intermediate is just hard to get away from it. And this is a structural issue. I'm not going to drag you down this tangent, I promise, but there is, because of the nature of the Kerry Championship, it just means that the teams who come from junior intermediate into the All Ireland are way stronger. They're not at the same level. And you see the dominance those clubs have, but from a Kilmena perspective, to do what they did, but immediately that was one thing. You put a circle around that, and you would have, you look at someone like John Lloyd. Okay, there's a manager you want to keep your tabs on, because that was a very impressive thing to do. And anything I've heard of him since, anything they have done since, would only add to that. So I think this could be a great game. Again, I'm really looking forward to it. Hopefully the tune will get a fitting send off.
Just before I bring John in there on Kilmena's rise, because it is really impressive there, as you mentioned, do you expect Trevor Mullins to go on Jack Carney this weekend?
Yeah, I think so. Like it's, I think Jack Carney is a fabulous footballer. Like I think the one of the best individual displays I saw this year was the Mayo Kerry game, where he was just awesome in the midfield. He was playing centre forward, but they very clearly had their homework done. They decided they're going to exploit. If Tyke Marley wanted to sit off, they're going to exploit that. He's going to drop into that space. He's going to rule the skies. And I think with a guy like that in club football, you just need to. It has to be 100% your task. You just need to go to town. That is, you can't let it, because we've seen it. We saw it that actually on that great run, and how impressive he was in Croke Park. I think off the back of that, that's originally under James Horn, that's what he would have been called into Mayo under, and he's just gone from strength to strength since. So a guy like that, I think it just has to be, that's your priority, that's your job. There's no better man in terms of somebody capable of doing that. But I don't think it's not about matching him or trying to stretch him the other way. It's just break even, and a game like this, you'd be relatively happy.
Yeah. No, I agree, Paul. I agree with you, Maurice, there. The two best games and the most exciting games I've seen in the championship this year was arguably the two intermediate games that Kilmena were involved in. The semi-final against the favourites by Bohola Mike Davis. Cracking game played out in Island. 7 points down, Kilmena didn't panic, got the game into extra time. Jack Carney began to flourish, scored a cracking goal, absolutely brilliant. And he just began to bubble when the opposition began to flag. Got them into a final against Bannerrobe. Bannerrobe, lots of people favourites, bearing in mind that, Kilmena having won their first, their junior championship in 22, and obviously went on to the All Ireland. Come up into intermediate in Mayo is quite a big step. And Bannerrobe were the favourites, but again, going down the home stretch with 10 minutes to go, the game was in the balance. It was super game of football played on Saturday in McHale Park on Saturday evening. And just when you felt that Bannerrobe were pressing on, up steps Jack Carney. The midfield opponents began to flag, and he just drove on and carried Kilmena over the line. Very, very impressive. I believe, and I didn't go in to see them last Sunday in McHale Park. I was unfortunately otherwise occupied, but I couldn't get in the game. But I believe it was his most consistent performance. They actually blew the Leitrim champions on a duff away in the second half. They were pressed for the first half, but that fitness and cohesion and the camaraderie that they have developed by going all the way last year on that crazy run, winning a title, really stands to a team, because the friendship and the camaraderie, the esprit de corps that you develop by staying together. And Kilmena, if you know where it is on the periphery of Westport, they have struggled out there with immigration and employment and holding on to players. A lot of them would travel east for work or what have you. And Kilmena, never really featured. And what they're doing now is quite remarkable. And I had a conversation today with George Golden, who was the selector with me, by chance about Kilmena, because he played with Kilmena, an All-Ireland minor medal winner in 1978, full-back, Mark and Barney Roth back in the day. But anyway, George is just saying it's quite a remarkable story what they've managed to do. And he puts it down to two brothers in the national schools, the two Carney brothers here, that have just fostered a great culture of football at national school level, and it has flourished and grown into this great little team that are now competing for Connacht intermediate titles after winning a junior title last year. It's a great story. Jack Carney has improved game on game, an incremental improvement on his game. I know the McDaid very, very well. One of my best friends is an uncle of Killian. I followed their story. I kind of, every time he picks up an injury, he's picked up quite a few, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think a call to his dad. He's a huge loss. But the word from one or two in that from that geographical area, this might be a little step too far for Camina in this game. But don't write them off because their fitness levels are high. They're playing with great spirit and great cohesion, and they won't give up. So if it's a tight game, maybe Jack Carney just to drive on the last couple of minutes without a Killian McDaid to nullify his threat, maybe to kick a winning point and maybe shield it by a point or two. But I think, like you said, Morris, the quality of football that I've seen this year has been in the lower divisions, intermediate and junior. And Kilmeen in particular have caught my eye with a couple of great performances, particularly in their semi-final and their final down here.
I think, Morris, there's a lot of people in Galway football circles interested to see Monivea this weekend, and even in particular the younger players, because they've stepped up a lot this year, how they get on here at provincial level.
Yeah, and there's probably, especially after the final, I think there's now I know it would have been a team on this podcast anytime I talked to you, I think I'd bring him up, but there's definitely a kind of a renewed sense of excitement about playing Kelly post the intermediate final. And just to see this guy sailing, just to double down on it, like I think his free taking is such a handy thing to have, where you just know from 40 yards in, if you get a free, this guy's just absolutely nearly accurate from it. And is a real live wire. So there's a bit of excitement about that. And just but I suppose as well, Paul, it's probably worth mentioning for anybody who is thinking of going into the tune, this isn't that Galway don't organise this game, so you have to buy tickets beforehand online. You're not going to be able to buy them on the gate like you would have done for championship games. But yeah, from a Monivea perspective, I think there definitely would be an element of excitement to see where this team go. There probably would have, I'd say there was a small bit of I don't want to say sympathy, but and then people would have considered them slightly unlucky to even go down in the first place when you consider how close they were in a lot of their group games from senior last year, and they obviously would have been earmarked to come right back up. And it was interesting to hear Francis reference straight away after that, they had talked previously about going beyond a title, that their ambitions stretched beyond that. As I mentioned, when you hear Killian talking about wanting to get back if they make it to our park, they clearly have the ambition. Psychologically, that won't be an issue for them whatsoever. So yeah, it all kind of bodes nicely in that regard. It just so happens that they're coming up against a very good team. It's one of the rare games we see not even bookies can call. They're just splitting this 50-50 and letting people decide themselves. So, and I wouldn't blame them for that either.
Yeah, an interesting little side story there, as a guy called Caleb Halligan has relocated from Meath down to Westport, and I think he's living in Westport, albeit he's playing corner forward for Kilmeen in this year's championship. He has been absolutely fantastic for them. He's a big unit, about 6'2", 6'3", plays kind of orthodox on the inside line, corner forward, getting buckets of scores for them in every game. And he has been a huge addition to Kilmeen this year. Don't ask me about the lineage, how he ended up down in Westport, must be a girlfriend or something. But I think he's represented me at underage, and a couple of guys around the place speculating that he might be good enough to put on a Mayo jersey in the future. But it'll be interesting to see how he features. But that's just a little side story there. But he's been a huge addition to Kilmeen this year.
Just on Monivea too, Morris, are they at an advantage here because they played senior football last year now, do you feel?
I'm not. Yes and no. Like I don't know. Does it count for as much in a game like this? I wouldn't say, for example, that would be a certain disadvantage to Kilmeen going to head into this weekend. So I don't know necessarily how much more it bodes for Monivea. Now, in saying that, I do think one thing that stood to them this year is that they were in Division 2 of the league. They treated it seriously in terms of they were very competitive in it, and they had the amount of time games. If you go back and look at their results, the amount of 1 point games they came out on, like really competitive games, which seem to stand to them come the championship. So that definitely is an advantage from this year's perspective. I suppose maybe in terms of a game sense and stuff, but I don't think it's a decisive factor for this weekend either, and I definitely don't think it would be a major disadvantage from a flip side. I just think the year they had, the fact that they came through to championship, all that would have them in much better stead than whatever happened last year, to be honest.
Yeah, as Morris is saying there, this game in the bookies, both teams evens to win this. So looks like there's going to be nothing in it. Just on the Connacht Junior Semi then, Laherdon McHale's versus Menlough. 2017, John, was, as we mentioned, when you were with Laherdon, but there's obviously a lot of people in Laherdon probably thinking back to that time now this weekend.
Yeah, it was an exciting run. We were beaten subsequently in an All-Ireland semi-final by Mount Bellew, who were subsequently beaten in the All-Ireland final. But it was a great run. It generated excitement. I think this current Laherdon team are better. They have a lot more quality and a lot more youth. I think there's only 5 players that played on the team, that started the team in 2017, still playing with Laherdon. One of them being a 38-year-old guy called Barry Leonard, who played with the Mayo Juniors. Incredible cornerback. He's been an ever present for 20 years, maybe longer, playing for Laherdon, but he's playing great super football. I have 3 nephews landing out with the team. James, Matthew, and Jareth, centre back and centre forward and corner forward. The Laherdon are brought in about 4 or 5 young lads, which is great to see for a small little rural village, put on the map decades ago because of 13 people who died tragically from the area in the Titanic Memorial Park down in Laherdon. So it has a sad history on the footing Yafan. But what it does for a small, and you both will be familiar with this, the kind of excitement it generates. And I was down there on the night of the county final. I went down to have the fun and the crack. There's 2 pubs in it, incidentally, and it's just to see what it does for a small rural village. And that's the positive thing about the GA. I've knocked it particularly tonight about how we need rule change and all that kind of stuff. But nonetheless, to witness the excitement and the fun that comes into a village when you win a county title it's just remarkable, and it's long may that continue. But I have no idea how they're going to get on Sunday. I know nothing about the Menlough, but I get the impression the big Clonbur, I think, on a scoreline of 4-14 to 4 points. That certainly caught the eye. How did Clonbur manage a team that I saw playing in I think a Connacht Semi-Final here a number of years ago in McHale Park? And I was taken aback with that scoreline. That, to me, kind of put the frighteners on me. I said, hey, if Laherdon are playing Menlough, could be in a bit of bother here if they can put up 4-14 against a team from Clonbur. Clonbur, I think, played intermediate football and played senior football, as far as I recall, back in the day. So, look, it'll be an interesting game. It's one I'm looking forward to for obvious reasons with family connections. But hard to call it. But I think one that I'm looking forward to nonetheless.
I got a text from the Menlough selector, Johnny Ryan, during the week, just for a question for you, saying, does he agree that Laherdon are favourites to win the All-Ireland?
Anthony, I must make it my business say hello to him and hopefully have a beer with him in McHale Park in the Sportland afterwards. Look at it. I have this. Look at it. The nice thing about Laherdon is they struggled so badly in the earlier parts of the campaign, and I was given out to my nephews, and to see them just improve game on game and get on and win a title. Certainly, I didn't foresee it. I think a lot of them didn't. But it's amazing with an outside manager, Edward Conway, who played with a native of Charlestown, who played with Brafey, put his hand up and said, look, I'll manage the team when it can be so difficult. We've got to respect and recognise this. To go down and manage a Laherdon team where the lotto takings on a weekly basis might be 60 or 70 euro. Very often they give out €100 prize money, you might only take in €60. You know, to keep the game alive down there and the work that goes on behind the scenes and fundraising and everything from jumble sales to raffles and what have you, raffling suck cows and sheep and banners just to buy the footballs. It's kind of a fairy tale stuff. It's nice for that it's nice to see that what happens in a small village. And as I say, I'm really looking forward to the weekend and that game in particular.
It's kind of similar with Menlough as well, Mars. They're obviously a very small club, but like they're making the most of what they have this year. Interesting to note for people who aren't aware there, Neil McHugh's the manager of Menlough, is going to begin as manager of the Galway Miners in 2024. But the last few games, they've been impressive. Like even the last day, they weren't necessarily fancied against St. Michael's or Roscommon, but really blew them away in the second half.
Yeah, one of the things you would have got the sense, and I'd be at the county final would have definitely got the sense. There was it was a huge kind of emotional outpouring. The game, I thought maybe, particularly during the second half, there was kind of wide for wide, and it started to fizzle out, and it nearly felt like they got their energy from the crowd. You really got that sense of pride in the road home, and particularly like sunk some really clutch frees at the end. And it's probably there's an element of why this grade is one of like the best grades in competition. It's such an enjoyable grade to cover, because you get these kind of, part of the frustration maybe from a national general perspective is that we're starting to see the dominance of the super clubs becoming more and more prevalent. And as a consequence of that, you don't necessarily see, there's a certain standard of club who are always up there, and you don't really see this boat to come from nowhere and launch a big streak. And you could probably anticipate the semi-finalists more or less every single year. And that's the total opposite as you go down the grades, which is one of the reasons that I enjoy it as much as I do, and why that, despite maybe the quality from definitely in the curtain raiser to the senior final, just the sense in the crowd kind of got you invested in the game, and got you kind of got swept away in it. So you'd hope for something similar this weekend. And either way, you're probably guaranteed, no matter what the result, you're probably guaranteed similar scenes afterwards, which always adds to it.
How do you see it going at the weekend, Marsh?
Well, I've seen more of Menlough than I have, so I'll go for. I think if pushed, I think I'll go for 3 Galway wins this weekend.
And I presume the Lardon hat's on this weekend, John?
Yeah, I look, I find it very, very difficult to predict this one. I find it a little bit easier. Obviously, the senior final to me is a little bit more familiar to me with the opposition and what have you. I haven't seen Minnock play. It's very, very difficult for me to call it, but I'd be hoping, just give my finger crossed, that Lardon prevail. And the fairy tale that Camina, they're on a great journey. I know they have achieved their target for 2023 and winning the county title. Just might be a little bit step too far for them as well. So, yeah, Corofin. I think I may be I'm up 2-1. I hope we win the junior. I hope we win all 3, obviously, but
we're hoping you're wrong there, anyways, about all 3.
Yeah, I hope we win all 3. I'd love to, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, so it sets it up nicely this weekend for the Galway and Mayo rivalry. Action in the senior, intermediate, and junior semi-finals. But that's all we do have time for on today's show. Thanks a million to the lads for coming on.
Thank you very much.